Hi everyone, and a very, very good afternoon. Thank you so much. I'm guessing a lot of you are coming all the way from Delhi, maybe Noida, Ghaziabad, all the satellite towns around Gurgaon right now because Gurgaon seems like the center of our universe. Thank you so much for braving the cold on a Friday afternoon and being here with us. With this, I want to invite you to be a part of a wonderful panel discussion that we'll be hosting today. But before that, I want to invite you also to a movement, right? When we talk about some of the most famous campaigns run in the world around women, we almost always think about them as victims. We think about women as survivors. We think about women braving something as if they're always in a storm. Very recently, and this happened in 2024, a French woman, Giselle Pellicotte, I don't know how many of us have heard about her. The slogan that has been going around because of her courage to say that shame must change sides. It is time that we look at women not from the angle of victims or survivors, but also as people who shape our societies. Women must not be shamed for the things that they have gone through. The campaign essentially starts with Giselle, who's a 70-year-old grandmother, came out with her story of rape, not only by somebody who she didn't know, but by her husband, and dozens of men invited by her husband over a decade. When she came out with this, she said, shame must change side because I will provide all the evidence in the court because it is not me who will crawl away in shame, but be the center telling the story so that we have the courage to come out and say that we need to change the narrative around women in general. I was barely maybe say, in not even in high school, I was younger than that. I was a 13-year-old. And I would be standing outside my school waiting for my mother to pick me up. A large part of my young adulthood was about being bullied because the other children would say, your mother doesn't care. She's not here to pick you up on time. Because my mother was a working woman. It is now with pride that I say I'm a fourth generation working woman in a country like ours. I don't need to say more about that, where my great-grandmother was a working woman in her own right. She started a small knitting and a elementary school for the neighborhood children. My grandmother retired as a principal of a school. My mother was working, and I had only seen working women around me in my family, but that was the smaller circle that I belonged to, and I didn't understand why this is not normal, right? When you're shamed into also being a public person, there is a lot of grudge that you almost hold against a society. But that grudge, with this initiative and the women that I have in my life, is being converted into courage and love and radical kindness. I talk about the School of Campaigners from a place where it was, birthed, but also before that, what we are trying to do. I am Kangshi Agrawal. I am the founder of Access Polity, an initiative which is building an infrastructure, sort of a back end, to support gender inclusive primarily, but inclusive campaigns that win elections. When we're talking about these narratives, we're trying to shape society one story at a time, one slogan at a time, and one courageous story at a time, right? So on that note, Access Polity thinks about creating an impact in the political space. But how do we do that? Who's going to actually get to the ears of the politicians who are demanding the courage of your story to be out in the open, and so that they can speak about it in policy? So School of Campaigners is a gender-forward political campaigning project led by Access Polity, supported by Apolitical Foundation, and implemented in partnership with around 7 partners, including VILAG, The Womb, Sapiens, One Future Collective, Tattle, and Jarvis. It is a supporting infrastructure for candidates entering politics with a gender-forward agenda, particularly focused on Latin America and Asia, but this is the Asia School of Campaigners. And it is our first initiative to build that resilience for hope in politics. The goal of the School of Campaigners is to equip campaigners with the knowledge and the skills necessary to effectively campaign for candidates, those who want to run on those agendas, because you usually see that there are people who want to really change the world, but they don't know how. The know-how usually comes from experts who are behind the scenes, right? Our aim is to actually foster a robust network of campaigners and develop a toolkit for such campaigns. But one could always ask, why this, why now, right? Because as we are talking about a society which is also simultaneously becoming more regressive than we thought it would, the number of women dropping out of the elected positions and campaign races has also increased dramatically. The threat of violence as we speak, both online and offline, has become the main barrier for women and anybody actually with a more inclusive agenda which would want to include the marginalized people in their foray, has been an expelling factor, right? And campaigns are facing this unprecedented challenge as they navigate campaigns marked by misinformation and impacts of generative AI. So this school was thought of at the intersection of, yes, you want to change a narrative, yes, you want to present an inclusive narrative, but you also want to win an election, and you want to do it using the right technological tools, because these are the tools of the day, right? I always give this example that, when we think about wars, what were they fought with? Think about Mahabharata, right? You would think about the tools that were present in that day and age. Think about World War I. What were the primary tools? You'd think about guns. But in Cold War, by the time Cold War came, we were thinking about diplomacy. Right now, we are thinking about covert and very nasty narratives, and the only tool that you have on hand is to use good narratives with the skills and the tools of today. With that, I want to invite you to extend your ear, lend your support to the politics of hope, to the politics of courage, to the politics of sisterhood that is built with the tools of today. Thank you so much. I will invite Avani Bansal, who is my colleague, the founder of Womb, a Supreme Court lawyer, who has been instrumental in putting this all together, with our brilliant 20 cohort members, from 2 from Philippines who could not join us due to a lot of visa issues. And that aside, I really invite her to speak about, one, the vision behind this cohort, and second, also to introduce the panel that we are going to start with today. Thank you so much, and I really look forward to a very engaging dialogue today. Thank you very, very much.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Today is actually the culmination of about 6 months of work. And if you're here in the room, we know that gender matters to you, and creating an equal world is on your manifestation board for 2025 and hopefully for every new year that there is. Now, just to very quickly, Kamshi is the one person who has brought the entire team together, but we all know that change begins with a team. It's a few people coming together from around the world to make this conversation happen today. Now, Access Polity, The Womb, VILAG, and several other knowledge partners such as Sapiens, Tattle, Chai Pani, Jarvis have come together to select 20 political consultants from about 100 applications that we received, who are people who have worked with political parties, who have worked with political candidates, and to say, how do we design feminist campaigns? For example, we all know Nirbhaya happened in India, RG Car happened in India, under the regimes of 2 different political parties. But why does women's safety not become an election plan for any political party? Why are political parties happy and content in handing out a certain sum of money to women on a monthly basis, but not talk about systemic interventions in place about how we are going to make sure that, women equality are issues that are championed with? Now, for issues like that, you need political consultants who are going to champion these values in our political system. So these 20 cohort members from around the country were selected. They were trained for 6 weeks period in an online space. They also had a one-day conclave yesterday in a physical setting, and today is this external event where we're opening up the conversation for all of you to join in. Now, very quickly, to give you the brief overview of the program today, we have 3 panels. We're just going to launch ourselves into the first panel, which is reviewing the 21st century from a gender lens, or you can use the word reimagining. So how do we look at the 21st century from a gender lens? What has been achieved and what are the challenges? Then we'll go for a quick lunch break. We'll come back after lunch break. All of you are invited to join us for lunch. The second panel is on a very important topic, which is making politics safe and viable for women. How do we do that? And then a tea break, and then a quick conversation about how the conversation on gender cannot happen with women alone. We need to bring in men as allies. We need to together create an equal world. So Men as Allies is our third panel, and I very much hope that although it's a cold, foggy day, if you're here in the room, you really will stay with us till the end of the conversation. Second very important point, this is not a dialogue. Hopefully, this is something that will be a multi-log. So while as the chair, I will take the privilege of asking the initial few questions, we will keep 30 minutes. So all of you, no matter what you have in mind, an observation or a question, ask away and engage in the conversation. With no further ado, we have fantastic speakers for the first panel. May I request all the speakers, Kavita ji, Sukhi, and Vasudha, to please join us here on the channel. Let's give them a round of applause. Hi, is this working? Hi, mic check. Perfect. Thank you so much. So we have 3 panelists with us today, and none of them need any introduction, but just very quickly so that some of you in the audience also learn about their work. We have with us Ms. Kavita Nandini Ramdas, who is globally known for her work on gender equality and advocacy around gender issues. She's been the president and the CEO of UN Fund for Global Women. She's also held a leadership position with the Ford Corporation, looking at their CSR initiatives also. Can we have a big round of applause for Kavita to be flying here today to be with us? We have with us Ms. Sukhi Capabianco, who is a Chief Strategy Officer with A Political Foundation. She's a Bolivian-German strategist, and she's been working all her life on gender issues, also ensuring how digitally and digital spaces can be made safe for women. So can we have a big round of applause for Sukhi? And finally, we have with us Vasudha. Vasudha is a political strategist, campaign advisor herself. She's worked for 5 years with IPAC, and now she has her own organization called Vote Bridge. So thank you so much also, Vasudha, for being here. And I'm also communicating sincere apologies from Sairi, who we all know has been the founder of Shiros, now is a founder of Mani Mahila. She couldn't be with us here today, and she's conveyed her apologies. Ishrat Jahan, who we know has spent 25 months in jail during the CA and RC protest, is actually in the middle of a political turmoil herself today. That also tells you about how women in politics is. It's constantly changing and it's constantly difficult. But their apologies, and now let's dive into today's conversation. So we will keep the conversation free flowing. So the quick pattern is, we will start with some questions. If we can have, let's say, 10 minutes for each of your responses. We can have 2 rounds of questions and then open it up to the audience. At any point of time, if any speaker has spoken and you want to add into it, please feel free to do so. We're not going to keep it very structured. So let me start with you, Kavita. You have global experience. You have experience of India in your personal capacity, also because of your work here, but you've also worked in America and you've seen what's happening in terms of gender around the world. My question to you is, when we think about gender today in this room, how far have we come and how far do we have to go? Um, is there reason to be happy? And what are some of the things that we need to specifically tune in moving forward? So from your lens, how are you seeing gender in the 21st century?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah. Do you want me to use this?
Okay. Salam Namaste. I'm Kavita Ramdas, and I just have just for the record, just corrections. I didn't work with the UN ever. It's the Global Fund for Women, which is an independent, publicly supported foundation that I was president and CEO of. So we raised money to give money away. Important because the UN may not quite be excited to hear that I had a job that I didn't have. And I never worked for the Ford Corporation. I was the South Asia representative of the Ford Foundation, which, while Henry Ford's money endowed that foundation, has no links directly to the corporation, the Ford Motor Company. So just for the record, since this is being videoed, I want to make clear. I have been a gender rights activist all my life and a very proud feminist, and I'm really glad to see so many people in the room and lots of men in the room as well, which I really appreciate. For me, as I was saying to colleagues here yesterday, feminism has nothing to do with what is between your legs and everything to do with what is between your ears, aka your brain. It's a way of thinking about the world that acknowledges equality and justice and respect for all human beings, absolutely irrelevant to their gender or their age or their ethnicity or their background. It's an approach to the world. And for me, when I think about what does the 21st century offer us if we apply a gendered lens, it isn't actually about the differences between women and men. It's about an approach that we take regardless of whether we are women or men or people who identify as genderqueer. It doesn't really matter. It's a way in which we think about a world in which we could ensure that all human beings had the kinds of opportunities and chances and the voice and power to actually make themselves heard, including in the space of political change and political power. So when I think about so where are we right now and how am I feeling about it, I think in many ways I feel very positively about it. I think just sitting in this room and feeling that there's a conversation happening in India, where I grew up 62 years ago, and that is something that draws enough response to actually have a conversation about it. For me, that feels like we have come a long way, baby. I mean, I definitely feel like that has made that there is a difference. So I don't think it would be fair to say that nothing has changed. I think a lot of things have changed. I also think it is true that in each generation, that the impact of patriarchy, which is a system of oppression, a system in which I would argue people of all genders are oppressed, maybe not equally, but a system in which all people of all genders are oppressed. Let me say a few things about that, because I think that isn't something we normally think about. I think that no system that says one group of people have to do X set of things and another group of people have to do Y set of things based solely on either their gender or the color of their skin or their caste or any other randomly assigned characteristic is a fair system. And therefore, if you have a system in which men are disproportionately, just by virtue of having something different between their legs than what women have, are told, your job is to always be the provider. Your job is to always make sure that you're the person who goes to fight in all wars. Your job is the job to make sure that your sisters, your mothers, your everybody else who is a woman is protected and safe. That's a crazy responsibility to put on anybody by virtue of what they happen to be born with between their legs. And it's not particularly fair, because I think all of us in this society have a joint responsibility to take care of each other. There isn't it's not that just because men might be slightly, some men, not all men, by the way. I'm taller than a lot of Indian men. I'm stronger than a lot of Indian men. I always have been that way. I was that way by the time I was 11. I was 5'7". Well, that already made me taller than most Indian men, really. So, so there's not an assumption about our characteristics as being all men are this or all women are that. In fact, we know this from science, we're on a continuum. We're on a huge continuum in which there are highly, quote unquote, what we think of as being masculine women on this side of the spectrum of what it means to be a woman. And all the way on the other side, there are highly, quote unquote, effeminate, whatever that means, men on the other side of the spectrum. But it doesn't actually mean we are all the same. In fact, we're hugely different, regardless of whether we are one gender or another, or one sex or another sex. The question about gender is not the same thing as sex. Really important to understand. So for me, the idea that we say this is a conversation about how women lead differently and how men lead differently, no. Gender is about the assigned roles that society places on a group of people by virtue of who those people happen to be. And I would say you don't need to have a vagina to be able to, make a meal, or to make the bed, or to pick up after yourselves when your socks are on the floor. You're quite capable as a man of doing all those things. Quite well, actually. Turns out I've been married to a man for 40 years who's doing a great job picking up his own socks and making a really delicious meal. And in the same way, I would say that the oppression of women is unarguably a fact of what patriarchy has been, right? For these vast sort of millennia, 5,000 years, not all of it, but a lot of it, and not in all societies, but in which there's been an assumption that women somehow have a large less than sign. It's not a bindi, but you might as well have a great big tattooed sign on your forehead that says you are less than. But the less than also in some ways came with certain other kinds of privileges, and I don't think we talk about that enough. I don't think that having a traditional, quote unquote, traditional female role automatically means that you have no power. You just have power in different spaces. And I think that is also important for us as women to recognize and acknowledge that it isn't that we had no power, it was that the spaces in which we were allowed to exercise power were defined. But to some extent, that was also true for men, that the spaces in which men were allowed to exercise power were defined. And partly this moment that we're in for me in the 21st century is that we collectively, men and women and people of other genders, and I love the fact that genderqueer people and LGBT communities are helping us get out of this binary of male-female. Because when you get out of the binary of male-female, you also get out of the binary of other things. India good, Pakistan bad. White people bad, black people good. No, there is no such binary thinking. It's not helpful. We know that intersectionality is important. So for me, I think I'm very optimistic. Honestly, I'll end by saying that for me, I think I'm very optimistic about the potential for us to bring a gender lens into a feminist lens. If I would say the difference in a gender lens is saying, oh, we understand the differences between men and women and we're aware of them when we're making programs. A feminist lens says, we want a world that is better than the world today. We want a transformative world, a world in which all people, regardless of our gender, regardless of our caste, regardless of our age, have the potential to contribute to and shape a world that is more just and equal and sustainable for all of that. And to do that, we have to begin by understanding that men and women are affected by the current systems of domination and inequality, and that patriarchy is only one of them. It's not the primary one, it's not the most dominant one, but it intersects with all of the other forms in ways that can actually make it extremely difficult. But I have a lot of hope about what is changing in that space. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I think one big thing that came out is that the need to get rid of this binary thinking, right? Male and female, right or wrong, and also the importance to see that there is intersectionality in all the work when we are talking about gender. But I just want to take one of the things that you touched upon about creating an equal world and actually just take that question to Vasudha for a minute, which is that if we are talking about in the 21st century, having a political system or creating political parties which are going to be gender equal, which are going to have the feminist lens, tell us what are they going to look like? So, for example, if you were drawing the manifestation board, what should political parties in India be doing for us to say that yes, these are parties that are working towards equality and gender inclusiveness? What does it look like? Because currently we are seeing none.
Absolutely. I think it's a lovely question and it's a lovely vision board exercise. I think everyone should wake up every morning and, do these affirmations for sure. So when Kangshi was speaking and when we were speaking yesterday, so I did think of in what categories would, say, a feminist political party or a political system altogether shape the world. So I have a few categories and I've already written them down if you can just allow me to read out from my phone. So I think the political system, what I see, the first change that the political system would bring is the way we vote, right? So instead of first past the post system, we would have, say, a preferential voting system. That is what I feel, right? So it's not about, between us four, who won the election by one more vote. It would be within the us four, who is number two the most, right, in the people's chit of voting. So I think that's the way the presidential election in India happens as well, or used to happen. I'm not too sure about that. But that would be a wonderful way to begin, right? It's not about who wins. The idea of winning itself will change. That who is most likely to get conciliation developed in the nation because they are the most liked across the board. So political system, that is one. If I could just borrow a little from Gloria Steinem, leaders would boast how inclusive their cabinets are, instead of crossing out and no, their opposition, we are the ones who won. It would be, we have people who got the highest vote from the other party or from the other gender, whatever it may be, or from a regional imbalance sort of area in the state, etc. I think power transition would be clean and timely. No one would want to be kursi ka khel. The term kursi ka khel would stop existing in our world, I feel. It would be, okay, my time to serve is over and now it's your time. That's how I visualized it. I may or may not be correct. And election finances would be more optimized for sure and more transparent. I think that is just something that naturally comes from within, and that would be, I mean, that would be a very good manifestation of bringing our current world into our future world. If we can begin with that, that would be great. In terms of campaigns, the way political parties do campaigning, I think it would be a community first and not a winning equation, right? Yesterday in the political session also we talked about what is a winning matrix, what is the equation of communities that get together to make you win. So you have a normal, your core political strategy and then a few strategies for a few communities that you can assimilate the vote from. But no, it will become about community first. So it will not be a campaign, but the main political system itself. Misogynistic languages used by political leaders would be a criminal offense. That petition, I'm ready to start right away. Deliberations would be of utmost priority. Something like demonetization would never have happened because in all of the debate about demonetization, political debate, not say academic or intellectual or these constrained spaces wala debate nahi, but the political debate never even talked about the money that rural women keep for themselves, hidden from their family, from their husbands, and what kind of a dent did it make in their life, right? So in a feminist political system, that would be of the prime most importance, and demonetization would have never happened. And as a political consultant, I would be so happy if I could use more colors than pink to denote. So we are only left with pink. I would probably pull a BJP or a CPIM and hijack orange and red, like for sure. And I'm wearing that for the significance as well. Three more very quickly. I'll just say space.
young leaders would have more space, right, in a feminist political system. Youth wing would be more active and not just rowdy. Right now it means, oh, active hai because, oh, bike rally ho sakti hai, jhanda, etc., etc. It won't be rowdy, it would be actually active, where people who are ahead in the political system through their age or the number of years of experience would look forward to choosing from the youth wing that who can we now give the mantle of responsibility to. Trolling would be done in such a way, because you can't change the human nature. So trolling would happen, but I think trolling would be, oh, you failed in the peace talks. You could not come to a consensus. You had to go to war. The trolling itself would change, right? Like, you would be condemned for not bringing peace instead of celebrating for being violent, right? So that is something that I feel. Autonomy would be with the public. Ecology would take a much bigger priority in our current ecosystem. Again, chief ministers would boast that our city has this much green cover, right? So that would change. Peaceful debates, of course. Widows would be placed at the top of structure, because more grief means more respect, right? That would completely change in my vision of feminist world. International relations, of course, conciliation, rehabilitation, etc. GDP would include unpaid labor, right? And then I think India would be top. So you can't change the nature of us wanting to win, but what do you define as winning itself? And I think the feminist political system is the only way that the United States of America will see its first female president. I don't think it's possible for them otherwise. Infrastructure is the most, I just feel infrastructure is very important to discuss here. PHCs and public toilets would become, gender neutral toilets would become #1 priority. That is, as consultants, like, I don't know if you know, like Sushma Swaraj ji and Sheila Dikshit ji, they would develop kidney stones because while they were campaigning, they couldn't use the loo, and for men, the world is the oyster. That is why there is no need to create a public washroom, and that would definitely change. And of course, PHC. Traffic will be less because public transport would be safe, right? So, I like that. Delhi. Delhi would be a walking city like any other European city. That would just be wonderful. Finance to rural women will not be called microfinancing. It would be financing, right? Justice, of course, rehabilitation will be more of a focus. Definition of violation will change. I feel right now, itna kar, that's not violating someone, right? The definition, co-definition of violation itself will change. And one thing which is a personal pet peeve of mine, health indicators would be segregated for women and children. Right now, all health indicators, when we talk about, most of them are, women's health, maternal mortality, infant mortality rate, all of the, but women have health of their own, right? Or segregated from being a mother. What about that? That is not calculated at all, or that has not been spoken about. And in terms of justice, I just want to end with this line. Ranbir Kapoor's character in Animal would be a villain and not a hero.
So, are we ready to create this world? Do you think it's possible? Yeah? Do we think it's just on manifestation board, or do you think we can all actively work towards it? Just quick raise of hand if you think this is possible. Okay, great hope. And then I'm coming with the most difficult question to you. If this is possible, why isn't this happening? And how do we get there? We have an understanding of gender and how we need to look at gender. We have a manifestation board. Why aren't we there? And how do we get there? I know it's a broad meta question which could also sound oversimplification, but I'm really trying to understand your perspective on it. And I just want to say one thing. She mentioned Gloria Steinem. and I was watching this documentary, right? Like, even in America, when women sort of came together to create this huge movement, to create the kind of society that we're just talking about, guess who the society was using against them? A group of women. To say that, suddenly this whole idea that women want to work, who would want to go to work? Wouldn't you want to be mothers and wives? This whole thing about women being used against women is also something. How do we save ourselves? In India, as a politician, my fear of using my woman identity is the male voters would say, "Ye to महिलाओं की बात करती है. She only talks about women." There's such a fear of this oversimplification every time you talk about women rights. From our experiences, how do we avoid that? I know I've packed in a lot, so please feel free to just.
Thank you, Avni. You put me in the in the very And coming from such inspirational interventions, wow. I'm so honored to be here. I just really wanted to say this. My first time in India. I'm originally from Bolivia, and it's been a long time, like a long life dream of mine to come. So thank you. It's been amazing to meet some of you and get a sense of the country. And I want to say that I think the best thing, the most important thing that stuck with me so far is that these people are full of hope. And this is absolutely phenomenal, because if we are going to build something like this, we're going to have to be convinced that it's possible. But hope is a driver that we need so much. And I feel it's somehow getting lost, especially in the younger generations in the Western world. I live in Germany, and I don't see this level of hope. I see a lot of anguish and despair and hopelessness. If we don't have hope, we cannot move forward. So that would be my first answer. Like, we need to be hopeful in the future. And one beautiful answer I heard yesterday in another meeting was, and it came from you, you need to have hope in the future, because the future, you are the future. So it's really, you need to believe in yourself in order to build this thing. Having said that, I think your answer is so multi-layered, it's so difficult to address, but I would like to point to one thing, and that is, for all of these things, when we think about all these beautiful things you were describing, there's a key element that we need, which is policy reform. We need to take over policy, right? Like, if we want to make all these changes, we need both. We need citizen mobilization. We need to believe in ourselves, yes. But we also need to go into politics. A quick question here in the room. Who of you are thinking about running? Raise your hand. That's not a lot. Who? Yeah. Who would never run? Who would never run, ever? Why? Really quickly, why?
I feel I can make better change outside the system of politics than I can in politics.
So she feels she can make more change, better change outside the system than inside. A lot of people think like her. You know why? Because the system is toxic, is violent. The system is not made, not just for women, it's not made for humans, it's not made for anyone. Please, so I work at the Political Foundation, and our very easy job is to basically support politicians. We're the politicians organization, and our logic is, how can we change this into this beautiful vision that we have if we don't have politicians that are supported, trained, resourced, and have the tools to change into that world? And that is a loop, if you think about it. Like, first of all, a lot of great people, these hopeful, beautiful people, have to want to go into the system. And for that, we need to build a system that is, attractive. If you want to be, nobody wants to grow, like, think about this. It would be so great if kids at the age of 5 would go like, I would love to be president. I want to be the mayor of Mumbai. Like, I want to do, that should be an aspiration. But what they're hearing is this very toxic, discourse about how politics is dirty, it's corrupt, it's a broken system. So it's something you're not aspiring to. That's actually kind of like shameful, to think like you should be a politician. What do you mean? What do you want? Money? You want power? What is it that you want? Right? And the truth is, in my line of work, I also lead the Women in Politics team. What I have encountered, especially at the local levels, is incredibly brave people who don't want those things, or maybe they do. I mean, we all want some kind of money, but they actually want to change their communities. They want to build what you described, in whatever scale that they can. So what's stopping them? The obvious answer, I'm kind of giving it to you, but the other one is a broader perspective. What I've heard from all over the world, from new people who want to come and change the system, like women. A lot of women are not in the system, we know that, representation matters. So why are they not coming in? Young people, LGBTQ people. Well, because they see what happens. Violence. It's a terrible system. It's a system that will destroy them. It's a system that through social media will tackle their families. They will go after their kids. They will go after their most intimate identities, after your motherhood, or decision not to be a mother. Well, you can't really win, you will be attacked anyway. So that's the basis of misogyny. But what do we do then? Our response is we need to do two things. On the one hand, we need to change the way we think and talk about politics, because if we keep thinking that this is not the right place to make change, then it won't be. And the problem is that's the way to make change quicker and more impactfully, because we still need civil society, But we also need to take over the state structures, because we need those reforms to happen. We need to make those rights institutional. We need to make that policy, and we need it right now, So I actually want, one vision that I want to add is I want to go to schools. And when I raise the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want people saying, I want to be a politician. I want to lead those things. I want to lead, This is something that I would think is essential to build that future. And the second thing is, and this is an invitation to all of you, when was the last time, there must be someone you admire in politics, I'm sure. Just like with everything in life, not everyone's good, not everyone's bad, but there must be someone you respect, at the very least. When was the last time you wrote a message of support? When was the last time you said, hey, that policy you're doing there, your work as a councilwoman, your work as mayor, your work as councilman, MP, that's great. I support you. Thank you. Thank you for your service. When was the last time we did that? This is something you can do right now. This is something you can do from your social media today. Because if we don't inspire the people who are already doing the good work, we will lose those entry points, those windows that we have right now to start building that future. So we don't have to lose them, and we want more great people like you, like this room full of convinced people that equality is something to aspire to. I want 50% of you to run, I want people with this mindset to be leaders. So that is my hope. I think that is where we get started now.
This is so powerful, and now I'm just like, I want to ask everything that I want to ask in the next 15 minutes. But before I come to you, Kavita, my sincere apologies. I did the classic mistake of writing down the introduction and then thinking about my next question and then just blabbering with complete lack of awareness. So my sincere apologies for also just getting that wrong. But here's a question. Yesterday, today was the event and we'd all sleep deprived a little bit, but we were picking a friend from the airport, and there was a male friend, we told you, who came to pick us up. And then we said we're just going to, sit down for tea, just rewind so that we're all ready for tomorrow. And he tells us, he was just picking us up, right? And he's just like, tomorrow you're having this event about women. What do you think about equality? What are you all really trying to do? And he's a lawyer, a partner in a top law firm. And then he was like, to be honest, and of course he had his guards down and he was really being honest. He said, when I'm interviewing women, I would think they are like resources. If I want a person to work with me as a member of my team, they are a resource. And if I interview and get a woman, and I know that she's going to get married and then have children, it's relative waste of my economic resource as compared to hiring a man. And I almost just stood up and cried because I was like, we need these conversations if your closest friends think this. And it was like a unfolding of many, many things. And at the end of it, he was like, oh my God. My question is, a lot of men and women in decision-making roles are always pitching economic interest and equality. So, for example, if you want women toilets, somebody needs to put their money where their mouths are, right? For example, for working women, if I have 4 working women in my offices, I'm not going to set up a creche facility. So every time you talk about infrastructure or creating that world, somebody will have to put their money. And they are just not convinced why this matters, because most of them have never got the awareness that they are privileged. It's like in this building, if a person who's differently abled or on a wheelchair cannot come up,
Correct.
we are not even aware that it's a privilege for us that we are able to walk up the stairs. Now, if there are 2 people who are going to come in a year, is it worth the economic cost to put that ramp up? How do you answer that question of, yes, there's going to be money, economic, but then we need to create an equal world?
So thanks. Shall I use this? Or
Whatever
this is fine. You guys can hear me?
Yes.
I think the really critical question over here is, and that's why I said earlier that we have a whole system which has kind of built in a way in which we think about. Oh, there's another one. Okay. Oh, he's redoing that. I don't. I'm going to wait. Thank you. इसको बंद करते हैं? New mic. Now I can burst into song. I think the huge question about that, it's an economic choice, goes back to something you said earlier, Vasundhara. In 1999, when I was president and CEO of the Global Fund for Women, we got a small request from a group in Barcelona asking us for money to support a women's strike. And we were like, a women's strike on International Women's Day, March 8th. This was the first time it had happened. And they had a very simple premise. They said, on March 8th, we want to tell every woman in Barcelona whether she quote unquote works, which by the way, all women work, just not all women are paid. So, really important to understand. That was what you mentioned, that if GDP actually included the unpaid labor of women and girls around the world, it would look really different, right? And the other thing to understand is, so what happens in this strike? So the slogan in the strike is, Cuando las mujeres paran, todo se para. When women stop, everything stops. And all they asked women to do that day was to just not do what they normally did. Don't make the beds, don't take the kids to school, don't go grocery shopping, don't go in the buses, don't, pick up whoever you were going to pick up. Just don't do any of the things you do. Come to the central square in Barcelona. That was the beginning of a series. You can look it up on Google. There's been a series of women's strikes in Spain, which is partially what led Spain to elect a feminist government, which is what they have right now. And in part, it was because they were making the point which actually hit home. The economy was in crisis. Just one day, Barcelona lost not millions, but close to $1 billion worth of resources because the things that women did unpaid labor-wise had huge economic impacts for the society as a whole. So I think one way for us to begin to change this logic, कि हम इनको hire क्यों करें? Because, if we hire them, they're going to get married and they're going to, then cost our company money, is the society, your point, the system itself has to change so that you actually see that work, which is the raising of a new generation. Like, how do you think you get that, dude? How is that supposed to happen? Like, magically unpaid, a new generation comes in, they're fed, they're schooled, they're given homework assistance. Who is doing all that? If you are actually paying for all of that work, you know that, because in India actually we do and can, middle classes can afford to outsource and pay for that work. You know that it's not free, right? That care work is actually not free. What enables you as a woman in a middle class household to go to work is that some other woman is in your house doing the work you would otherwise be doing. That's the truth, plain and simple. And the reason that I think we need a new system that actually acknowledges, so that your friend or 100 other friends who say, look, dude, I'd be fine hiring a woman, but she's going to go off and get married. How come we never ask men, are you planning to have children? We don't have to ask men that, because there is an assumption, automatic assumption made, that they will have a wife somewhere, or a mother, or a sister, or somebody who will do that work for them. And that has to change. That is bringing a gender lens to work. That is bringing, and that obviously has implications for politics as much as it does for any other field, right? I mean, there's no question. I just heard Shonda Rhimes, who, any of you have watched any of the Shondaland, right, Grey's Anatomy, and, Bridgerton, and 1,000 other things. She was recently asked, how do you, as a successful single mother of 3, do it all? And she said, I don't do it all. The truth is that when I'm succeeding in one area of my life, I'm failing in another area of my life. When I'm with my kids to do, to do bedtime and stories and put them to sleep, I'm actually not at Sandra Oh's last performance in Grey's Anatomy. I'm actually not there for the filming. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that it isn't possible for us to do it all, and neither is it important for us to do it all. But it's also important, and I'm going to share something personally. I'm married to a wonderful partner. He happens to be male in terms of kind of what's between his legs. But what's more important to me is what's between his ears. He is the most feminist person I know. And he's also a person who really hates the idea of going to an office to do work. And he told me that really early in life. And I really love going to work. And when we had our little daughter, who we love very much, after 1 month, I was like, I'm going to go completely mad if this is what I have to do all day long. I was on maternity leave. There's nothing bad about my daughter. I loved her. I was breastfeeding. It was cool, very nice, but I was bored out of my mind. Zulfikar, on the other hand, was having a great time. He could do this all day long. And at the end of that first month, we both very tentatively looked at each other and we said, how's it going? And I was like, I'm going crazy, dude. I can't do this. 3 months already seems like a long time. I mean, I love her and she's lovely and I want to spend time, but I don't want to do this all my life. And he was like, good, because remember that job I told you I was looking for? I don't really want a job. I would much rather stay home. I'm a much better cook than you, true. And I actually really hate being bossed or being the boss of anyone. How often do we give men a chance to come and say to us, hey, sweetheart, I love you, but I don't want to be the main provider for financials in this house. I want to do something else. I want to paint. I want to, I want to do something else. And I'm willing to pull my weight, because if we have decided to have a family, I'm willing to pull my weight on doing that. But I want to do something. Can you be the person who makes the money? I can't tell you how many feminist friends I've had, women friends, who are like, but what do you mean, yaar? He doesn't make any money. How many of us would ask that question if a woman had that job? Very few. And that's what I would like to say will change the equation so we can make that world possible, is when we have more women and more men who are willing to say, I'm standing with you to support you to be the man you want to be, whether or not that fits the image of what you're supposed to be in society. And to do that, we have to be a different kind of woman as much as we are expecting men to be a different kind of men.
Wow. Thank you for that. Very touching and very these are questions how we're dealing with gender on an everyday basis in our lives, in our relationships, and again, conversations we are not having. Vasudha, I'm going to you with a question that I worry very much about even today as we are having this conversation. Given how gender is being looked at in India today, sometimes I fear it's very easy for somebody outside this room to say, these are elitist people who are talking about elitist issue. You're talking about women who are 50% of the population, but people who are at a certain level, ये महिलाओं की बात करते हैं. These are a group of, sometimes as they would say, बिंदी वाली दीदियाँ, साड़ी वाली दीदियाँ, फर्राटेदार अंग्रेजी वाली दीदियाँ, who talk about women rights. How do you break and change this system? And do you fear that? So my question is, it's great that today we have 20 political consultants. It's great that we have about 100 people in this room today. How are we and what do we do to make this a movement and why are we failing? How do we communicate this? That when we are talking about women, we are talking about the entire country. Right? And we are not talking about urban, educated, elitist looking women. And when they're doing it, they are still standing with the women. So I come from Harda, Madhya Pradesh, right? And when I go and explain to them about the constitution, मैं उनको ये नहीं बताती कि कोर्ट में कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन कैसे होता है. I'm saying जब आप पानी लेने जा रहे हो कुएं पे और यदि कोई आपको बोल रहा है if you're going to take water in the well and if somebody says you can't do it, how do they use the constitution? So, but that global local thing, we understand academically. As a country, our political system makes sure that women like us, when we talk about it, they brand us in a certain way, and then that means the issue dies. Are you seeing that issue and how do we address it?
No, absolutely, you're 100% right. And, the thing that Kavita ji was saying is also tied into this, right? It's also, so politicians, like I remember my first few clients that we had finalized, they had given the first round of everything, like it was, we had started work, and then they asked me, because they knew that I'm married, so they asked me that, when are you planning to have kids? It should not meddle with my election. Right, like, so they were also worried about the same thing. So it's that economic pervasiveness is all throughout, right? But that's what I would answer to the economic aspect, that what if I have an all-male team and someone needs a mental health break, right? For 2 months, one month, 2 month, 3 months sabbatical is like very usual in the corporate world. You don't want to lose a good resource, so you would rather give them a sabbatical at like less, like no salary or half the salary or whatever the management may come up with. So that is one thing that I feel that even politicians, for consultants, I'm talking about the consultants first, that they have this idea that, okay, what about an all-male team that cannot fulfill your mandate? So there are a lot of ways in which you as an employer may find that your employees, quote unquote, all of this, employees are not fulfilling their duty or may need some break. So that part, I just would want that everyone to restructure the neurons in their brain that does not exist. Problems can occur with anyone. Secondly, when you were talking about how, they do brand us, 100% they do brand us. We were working for a leader from Uttar Pradesh, and we were making her campaigns. And, my style generally in guiding the team is a very, like a question answer style. So what do you think? What do you think? So they were getting stuck on a campaign, and I said, okay, put me there, and then what campaign would you make just to get their brains flowing? And they came up with a women outreach program. But why, right? Why, if I am a leader who is, again, to quote Kavita ji, what I may appear as woman, why can I only outreach to women? Why can't you associate a bike rally with me, right? Why can't I be in an open jeep, in a, top to bottom garlanded, and there are boys in front and there are boys at the back, and we are doing a completely, like, election commission would ban us type of a rally? Why can't you imagine that for us? So I think the way to change this or bring about this change so that we don't get branded is, number one, I feel we need to be more innovative like this. Okay, so like, say for example, I did the same mistake. I told my leader that would you be open to wearing a sari, because it will promote a more like voters would tend to like associate you, etc. And she's just like, no, I'm gonna wear my kurta pajama. But all men wear kurta pajama, so why did I tell her to wear a sari? Right? So one thing is, we can bring a lot of change. Consultants themselves can bring a lot of change, because now it's all pervasive. Like almost all leaders have a team, right? It's not, maybe it may be a social media team or like, some part of election management, but everyone has a team. So all of us have a role to play. So we can be sort of the catalyst, and if we start thinking, then. Second thing is, we have to promote more public spaces for women, right? Many times I'm campaigning, and like for 5 miles, 5 kilometers around me, it's just me who is a woman there. So if people see more women coming if politicians see more women coming out in normal election campaigning stuff, I think we would also tend to get branded less. So then again, the responsibility comes on political consultants, that how do you increase women participation in your average election campaigning activities, right? So that way we won't get sort of branded. And one thing that I am guilty of is that I don't I wear, if someone would look at me from far, they would see the most uninspired clothing on field. When I go on field, when I'm working on field, it would be the most D-shaped track pants and the most loose shirt and all of this. It's obviously to minimize attention to myself, of course, all of that. But in order to also not get branded and tagged, right? कि अरे वो जो साड़ी वाली दीदी हैं जो नेताजी के साथ चलती हैं, वो cancel करने के लिए, that is one thing that I do. And one more thing that I do is I always have a laptop in my hand on field, just to break that image, just to oh, she's a strategist, not a woman mobilizer. Do you get it? Do you get the difference? Just to...
Can
Yes,
I add
please.
one thing to that? I
Yeah.
was just thinking that one thing we don't think about with regard to this question of, do women at the grassroots level care about the same thing? If you actually look at the studies that World Bank did about when the reservations were put for women in village councils, UN Women just recently came out with a report saying it's a stunning but a very clear distinction. People dismissed it and said, oh, these reservations, they won't make, it'll just be the husbands putting their wives, whatever. Actually, it turns out that they've had a huge impact, that when women on the ground in local village panchayats had the chance to be in the panchayats, significant changes happened. So access to water, for example, went up by 62% across the board within 5 years of India having had that reservation. So I think it's also important for us to remember that at the grassroots level, it isn't that women aren't prioritizing or not seeing the benefit, but then how do we take that up a level from the panchayats then to the next level? And those are the things which you're saying. So I think we also have to tell stories with facts like this that actually remind people that at the grassroots across India, women are also playing significant leadership roles in politics, and they are making a difference on critical issues.
No, you're absolutely right. For 3 of our leaders who we were doing active electioneering for, we asked them to get in touch with the Panchayati Raj and the councillors, right? Panchayati Raj representatives and the councillors, because usually election campaigning is thought of, oh, I am applying to be an MLA, so I just have to deal with you. But the more and more we brought up their meetings with Panchayati Raj and Panchayati Raj representatives and councillor, we saw the demographic change now of the meeting. It became an all-female meeting or mostly female meeting, and that was very, very nice to see. But however, still that is just representatives. What I would want is more we to figure out how to get more women publicly participating in our. I think that would cause a serious dent in the system. And lastly, I just feel we have to stop thinking like this ना. Crux तो यही आ जाता है बार. कल भी when I was taking the political session, oh my God, 90% of the time I said, if your leader says, so what will you do for him? Why am I not saying her when I am her? I want to be her. I am in a public space with hers. Why am I not saying her? So, it's like a two-way system. But I just feel, okay, we are given too much credit for making someone win election. Okay, we're given too much credit. Itna nahi hai hamara contribution. We work on the margins, yes. Sometimes it works for us, sometimes it doesn't. But what we underestimate is our power for change. That is, the equation has to be ulta, right? It has to be upside down. We have a lot more power for change than power to make someone win an election.
No, and from what you're saying, right? So, like, for example, just in terms of also now beginning to sum up, I'll have one last question and I'm going to open up the floor. But then, when we're using the word feminist lens or feminist campaigns or a feminist world, what does it even mean? All of us have experienced in the world that we are living today, most people will just not admit their mistakes. Most people will not apologize. Most people will not be vulnerable. Most people will not be honest. Most people will try and show like they know it all. And when you do the reverse, you're already being the change and thereby creating a feminist world. Right? If, for example, when we are thinking, yes, all of these things that are being talked about sound great, manifestation board, but look around us, the moment I'm out of this room, how's the world going to change? For example, if one small thing can change, which is the way we're using the language, like she said, instead of always using the he, him, his, can we use more gender neutral pronouns? They. Listen more actively. Understand and recognize our own privileges and see where are other people coming from. We're all creating a feminist world just as we, sort of step outside this room. Suki, it's all great to talk about gender. Do we have the tools? You spoke about violence. You've done a lot of work around violence in India. Also, violence is a big issue. And while we understand it, yes, every political party and candidate would say, yes, let's do something about it. Are there any digital tools that we are beginning to learn that people should know, that people can work on? So, for example, the troll army that operates on social media. Every woman in this room, maybe even the men who are writing freely their views, know what the troll army is, right? There is a huge troll army. And that shuts us down. If I go and say one thing and I see 10 comments calling me all kinds of things, maybe I will think twice the next time I'm posting. I mean, I won't, but most people would. I'm now fighting with it. What are some of the digital tools that you can think of that people need to know or can think of?
Thanks, Avani. I think that's a really, really important question. In terms of what I know, even though I've been working most of my life in the topics of gender and violence against women, I do want to focus today on the violence against women in politics. And the reason is, around the world, also in India, but everywhere, women are starting to either not go into politics for the reasons we were just discussing, or quitting. Once we do these huge efforts to, funnel them in, win a campaign, then they quit. Because once they come in, it's just either super violent, toxic, or they don't have the resources to succeed. So this is a very bad kind of violence against women because it takes our voices, exactly what we're saying here, from the public space. So what are we thinking, how do we tackle this? At the Political Foundation, at the end of 2022, we published a report because turns out nobody was really looking specifically, or very few people in the world, about the mental well-being of politicians. And think about this, in the corporate world, you were just mentioning, and I want to build up from that. You take sabbaticals because, your mental well-being, you're stressed out, whatever. Do you think if a CEO would have a low level of mental well-being, would be under harassment 24/7, would be feeling terrible, working nonstop, be completely burned out, depressed, the company would be letting him make all the decisions, her make all the decisions? Do you think so? No, the answer is no. That CEO would not be making the decisions because that's crazy, right? That's exactly what's happening to politicians. So we went out there to figure out what the mental well-being of politicians is around the world. And what we found was catastrophic. Turns out the mental well-being of politicians is lower than that of first responders and police officers. It's lower. And the problems are, unprecedentedly complex, We're dealing with climate catastrophe in many places. We're dealing with wars, we're dealing with inflation, crisis, poly-crisis, and the people who have to make the decisions have a lower mental well-being than first responders and police officers who naturally are under stress constantly. What does this mean for us, If we don't tackle this, what do we expect about the outcome of those systems and those decisions? So we thought, okay, you're so right. One of the main barriers, and this is mostly true for women, but it's true for everyone, is online violence. The reason is There's still physical violence. Let me just point out to the example of Mexico. You know, there was just an election in Mexico where 2 women were runner-ups. In that election, over 30 candidates were murdered. Physical violence still real. But the common type of violence that's really massive is online violence, and this is a global thing. So what do we do? You know, if that's the main barrier, you know, and it is especially true for women because the violence is not just about the volume, you know. Online violence makes violence feel massive, you know. There's very interesting data coming out. Like when we talk to people to evaluate the mental well-being of politicians, they were saying like, politicians, you know, 20 years ago, I would receive, I don't know, 5 letters a month complaining or whatever. Today, I receive thousands of hate emails a day. How do you deal with the volume? And in the case of women, it's also the nature. It's absolutely misogynistic. Yes, I can fully believe in myself, think that I have, you know, 20 years of experience. But if someone calls me fat because of, you know, the patriarchal structures in my head, I will still feel insecure. This is the problem with misogyny. It is still so ingrained in our brains. If someone calls me a bad mother, it will still affect a part of me. So the effect of misogynistic violence on women leaders is different, and it's more impactful at an emotional level. What do? We asked these women what would be most helpful. You know, we've asked everywhere, women politicians, what has helped you? First obvious thing, I was just saying it in the last answer, support. Organizing networks of support, mentorship, coaching, it helps. We've developed a mental well-being program for women in politics, you know, to build on their resilience. And we're partnering with the Eco-Safety Commissioner from the Australian government to disseminate a great resource that they've developed, which is an online self-defense training course for women in public life. So this is kind of like the defense part, you know? We're working on that, and we're hoping to just build, you know, the strength from there. What about the other side? You know, what can we do on the prevention and offense side? So on the prevention, we're testing something just to put some tools out there and maybe inspire some conversations. We believe small tech can play a big role in finding solutions. I'm saying small tech because big tech have failed to do the basic, you know, obvious thing, which is regulating hate, and it's probably going to be even worse from now on. I don't know. So regulation is not within our control, but there might be interesting solutions coming out of small tech, and this might be even more interesting in India, which is such a hub for this, you know. We're working with a European small tech company. It's amazing. It's called Trollwall, and what they do is basically filter the hate. So we wanted to pilot how this works in terms of both protecting the mental well-being of the leaders, but also how it changes the discourse, you know, if you were able to actually clear that space. So one assumption was, you know, trolling is bad, but it also drives your reach. Yeah. It drives the conversation. Turns out, you know, we tested that. And guess what? Not true. When you remove the hate, the reach is not affected because possibly a lot of people that would not engage otherwise because of fear of the hate, they do. They do now. So there is a change in the nature of the conversation as well. So this is something we're piloting, and I think similar things could be obviously developed. Just to think from our positions, how do we improve the chances of changing the nature of the conversation, especially during electoral periods? And I would say my favorite one is something we've been thinking about a lot with other partners. We call it the ELFs initiative. So I love that you framed it like that. We all know the internet trolls, right? It's those either people or bots, you know, disseminating hate. What if we had elves, the good ones, you know? What if we had armies of good ones? Of elves, you know, coming to respond. So this was an idea that can take many shapes, many forms, depending on the context, you know? Exactly. Love it. So one big pilot that we have that I have a lot of hope for is right now happening with an organization in Colombia. It's called Civics. And we have a first cohort of elves. It's a group of young women who have been trained in online civic education. So it's not just about the hate, it's about what citizenship should look like online. You know, offline you have a sense, you're like, well, if there's rubbish, I should pick it up. If someone falls down or there's an accident, I should call the ambulance. You have an idea of what being a citizen means.
Well, we may have some work to do on that as well.
Right. but you still kind of like have a sense of it. This is a bit more difficult to grasp online. Like, what does it mean to be a good citizen online? So one of the ideas is, okay, so what if these elves would be the modeling citizens, teaching, showing what that looks like? What is the meaning of being a good online citizen? And moreover, what if they get activated when there's one of these attacks? And so they come to respond exactly like the women politicians said they need, with support. So it's not about the person that's being attacked. I may actually disagree with all of her ideas. It's about the fact, that this should not happen. I don't want hate, even if I disagree with you. So there has been some successful examples of, like, we call them love campaigns. That's exactly what it is. So trolls come, and then the elves respond, and they trump it with, like, super funny stickers with hearts, we love you, whatever, religious contests, they go like, God bless you, whatever. And it is fantastic, the way this changes immediately the dynamic of a troll attack, especially when it's about something like AI-generated content, sexual content, when it's something that could easily discredit a candidate immediately. If there is a wave of civic support and say, unacceptable, that's not how we play it, horrible, we love you, here's to, turns out we can change, the faith of that candidacy. And it is the best way we have found to tackle something that is almost impossible to tackle. The moment you get attacked, by something like AI-generated content, there's almost nothing you can do. Once it's out there, it's out there, right? But the threat is, and it goes to what you were saying and to most of the stuff we discussed, the real threat is that then either the parties or, people calling the shots will think, okay, then this is already done. Yeah. This candidacy is done. What if the reaction would be, no way, we fully support you, we double down. And this is something that a context like the School of Campaigners can think about, the way we mobilize our people, our bases, can have this logic, because I also think now in politics you're on permanent campaign. It's not just the electoral moment, but rather every time you put forward a policy, every time it's permanent, because that's how social media works, right? Round the clock. So it's just an interesting thing that we're thinking about, and just different strategies to build from the offense, the prevention side, and also the defense. What we can do to actively start changing. So helps.
I think we love this idea of elves, and I think we need elves not just in the digital space but also in the physical space. Yeah. You see a woman, somebody else like doing something wrong, stand up and say and make that protection. That's how sisterhood, brotherhood, and humanityhood, like, hold hands. Elves is holding hands together. With that.
It's very interesting what you said, and usually politicians or big leaders, proven track record and everything, they do have an army of elves, but they are not model citizens, online citizens. So instead of keeping the conversation very positive or not going into the mud, they instead start attacking. So even though they may have positive supporters, but the conversation is still not positive. So that is really wonderful. And the idea that you said about doubling down on someone in show of support who is at the center of an attack, that would be so helpful for women, right? That we need that the maximum in political space. It's like wonderful. I love it. Love the love campaigns. Love it.
Let's open up for questions, and I should have said this in the beginning. यदि किसी को रूम में हिंदी आती है, कुछ प्रॉब्लम है, कोई सवाल या किसी स्पीकर ने कुछ कहा जो आप हिंदी में सुनना चाहते हैं, मैं ट्रांसलेट कर सकती हूँ. आप अपना सवाल भी हिंदी में पूछ सकते हैं, जो मैं स्पीकर्स के लिए भी इंग्लिश में ट्रांसलेट कर सकती हूँ. Anybody who needs translation, Hindi I can do. So please feel free to, don't let language be a barrier. Any questions for anybody? किसी speaker से किसका? Do introduce yourself and also ask your question. And I'll need one volunteer very quickly to just help us move the mic around, please. भैया एक mic और दे दीजिएगा.
ये इनको दे दीजिए.
Do introduce yourself and pose your question. If it's for a particular speaker, you can let them know.
Hello, my name is Ashish Bhambre. I'm from Nashik, Maharashtra. I'm currently in Noida. My question is for everyone. In recent time, we have seen there is a shift of political narrative towards women voters. If you see the current Maharashtra election, where it was very much included on Maji Ladki Bahin or Madhya Pradesh election, all the elections are looking towards women as a voting tool, and specifically through the inclusion of DBT and all those stuffs which are happening. And if you see, like, Ajit Pawar's whole campaign was around the pink color, and it made me realize that how women are now campaigners tool to include themselves. And like the current campaign by Kejriwal also, 2100 rupees that they are. So are women for politicians only a voting tool right now, or they are envisioning that, oh, we want to really put forward women and had some inclusive development for them? So what is that thought process going on? Just wanted to let us know.
That's an excellent question, and I just want to, before all of you respond, add a statistic point that came out in one of our session that Mr. Devesh Kumar from Lokniti took yesterday, and that was an aha moment for me. He had stats to show that given in India, all political parties are offering a certain financial incentive. The numbers are differing, thereby arguably reducing them to passive agents. But in every state where this scheme is being offered, money to women directly in their accounts, women are actually statistically responding and voting in their favor. So obviously, statistically, that's working. The other thing is, when in one of their surveys, Lokniti asked, women's safety, is that an issue? I don't have the exact numbers, but maybe 1% women and 0.8% of men responded that this is on their mind when they are voting. If women's safety is going to be 1 or 0.8%, no wonder no political party is going to put something. So I just wanted to add those.
Can I suggest you take a few questions?
Yes, let's do that. Okay, perfect. So let's take more
And then we
questions.
can choose how we want to
Perfect.
respond.
Hello, I'm Dr. Hina. I'm from AIMS New Delhi, and I work in breast cancer. So I deal with lots and lots of women every day. So this is the only thing that connects me to this conference right now. That is women. So engaging with a lot of women and from all those years of experience, I would like to just question one thing: that are we really fighting against patriarchy? Is feminism not another side of patriarchy? Would we be creating a world where men are being oppressed, as we have seen in certain instances that have happened in India right now? So shouldn't we be focusing more on equalism and not just feminism or against patriarchy? That's just a general question to everybody, actually. Thank you.
There's one over here. Oh, you got one already. Yeah.
Hello. Hi. First of all, thank you so much for different and diverse perspective. My name is Rohit, and I'm a lawyer by education, and I'm currently run a not-for-profit as well. So my question is that there are women who have lived experience of violence by men or people from other gender as well, and there's someone who is on a journey of unlearning. Maybe someone as a man, like, because they were also problematic, they were also sexist, and there's a rage in the someone who has a lived reality of violence. In that case, in a culture which is very heavily polarized, in a world which is very heavily on dependent on cancel culture, how do we create enough discourses where women, maybe, I'm not putting the responsibility on them, but how can we find those channels of discourse? Thank you.
Yeah, I think, okay. Yeah, there are 3 more, but maybe we'll take 1 more there and then I'll come to you also. I just want to make sure the room is equitably balanced.
Good afternoon. My name is Divya Kashyap. I'm a concerned citizen. This question is for Ms. Singh, but is also open for everybody. Thank you for allowing us an opportunity for hope in this conversation. So I apologize for the contrarian nature of this question. You had said at some point that you had advised the leader to perhaps maybe consider wearing a sari. My question is, we are talking about reimagining leadership from a gender lens. However, and yes, we touched upon this, but if the last few American election cycles are anything to look at, is it just enough to just reimagine leadership? Are we doing enough to reimagine society, and is that happening at a equivalent pace for leadership to keep up? Because we can talk till kingdom come about what we should say, how we should say it, but is society going to accept it, and are we doing enough for that? And if so, why aren't we? So thanks.
Can we take okay, yeah.
सभी को नमस्ते। मेरा नाम उषा विश्वकर्मा है और मैं उत्तर प्रदेश लखनऊ से हूँ और मेरा काम पूरा महिलाओं के साथ ही है। तो मेरा क्वेश्चन आप सभी से है, क्योंकि राजनीति मुझे बहुत पसंद है। तो एक प्रश्न ये है कि आज पूरी दुनिया ये लगी हुई है कि एक महिला को सशक्त कर दिया जाए। सशक्त मतलब आर्थिक रूप से संपन्न कर दिया जाए, तो ये वायलेंस ख़त्म हो जाएगा। लेकिन आज भी जब हमारे पास केस आते हैं तो वो प्रोफेसर के भी मार खा के आती है, और जो वकील है वो भी मार खा के आती है, और जो इंजीनियर है वो भी मार खा के आती है। वो एक लॉयर को सबसे ज़्यादा ज्ञान है संविधान का और उसके लॉ का। वो सब करने के बाद भी, अच्छा पैसा कमाने के बाद भी वो अपना डिसीज़न नहीं ले पाती है, तो उसके लिए क्या करना होगा? दूसरी चीज़, हम राजनीति की बात कर रहे हैं और अभी तो 1/3 आने वाले की बात कर रहे हैं कि हम 33% की भागीदारी होंगे। तो क्या हम उसके लिए तैयार हैं, या फिर हम प्रधानों वाली हाल हमारी होगी? प्रधान तो मैं रहूँगी लेकिन रूल कोई और चलाएगा। और अगर तैयार नहीं है तो उसके लिए क्या किया जाए? तीसरा प्रश्न, कोई सरकार, बस लास्ट है, ये सब में जुड़ा हुआ है। अभी तक जितनी भी सरकार आई, क्योंकि यहाँ सारे युवा बैठे हैं और वो सब बैठे हैं नौकरी की तलाश में, सब पढ़ रहे हैं उसी की तलाश में। क्या ऐसी कोई सरकार अभी तक इस पूरे देश के युवाओं के लिए नौकरी का कोई प्रबंध कर रही है, या उसके लिए कोई विचार कर रही है, या कुछ वही ऑप्शन दे रही है कि हम फिर से भेड़ चाल में लड़ते रहें? तो ये कब आएगा कि अगर पॉलिटिशियन आ रहा है तो वो अंतिम व्यक्ति निर्भीक होकर के काम कर सके कि हाँ, मैं अपना तन अपने बच्चे का पेट भरने के लिए नहीं बेचूंगी? तो उसके लिए मुझे लगता है कि सोचना होगा, और आपसे ये जानकारी मैं चाहूँगी। धन्यवाद।
कविता is saying कि आपको राजनीतिक ऑफिस के लिए लड़ना चाहिए, चुनाव लड़ना चाहिए।
थैंक यू। मेरा काम है कि बहुत सारे लोगों को तैयार करूं ताकि उस पद पर आ जाए।
I just quickly translate her question because it was a comprehensive question before I lose the sense of it for Suki in the room also.
अच्छा, मुझे अंग्रेजी नहीं आती है तो कोशिश कर रही थी आप लोगों को समझाने
नहीं, इसलिए मैं ट्रांसलेट कर रही हूँ।
जो जवाब है मुझे हिंदी में दिया।
नहीं, जवाब हिंदी में, यदि ये देती हैं तो मैं हिंदी ट्रांसलेट करूँगी, बाकी कोई हिंदी में बोलता है तो कोई। So her question basically is, she's working with a lot of women at the grassroots level. Her first question was that we are all talking, I mean not just we, like the larger conversation is, let's empower women by making them financially empowered. But there are a lot of financially empowered women who are lawyers, who are doctors, right, who are maybe earning their own money, who know their rights. They are still being beaten. What do we do about that? That was the first question. The second question was, in India, there is a law which has been passed saying that women reservation will be up to 30%, 33%. Of course, in the parliament, and let me add that the implementation has been put at bay. So the law has been passed, but we don't know at the moment when it will be implemented, which is another challenge. But her question is that even if it were implemented, are we all ready for it? Because what happens is that at the local council, village level, there is a reservation and there are women sarpanch, women local councillor leaders. But then they are just for namesake, it's their husbands who have all the effective power. So if 33% reservation comes in, members of parliament, will they be empowered? Or again, will it be their husbands, brothers, whoever? And her third question, or the third point rather, was that employment is the biggest question. Again, economic empowerment. When will that day come when people don't have to sell their daughters and their bodies, or women don't have to sell their own bodies to be able to feed their children.
Let me answer the question that came from Hina ji. Hina ji, agar maine aapka naam sahi suna. There was a question about ki feminism and patriarchy, is it kind of, are you seeing them as opposites of each other? Meaning one is privileging men and one is privileging women. So I just want to say, nay, that was your point. That was your point. So I want to say something which I think is a problem with even the term feminism actually ironically was used by a male social scientist in France a long time ago. And the reason it is an important term is that it was arguing that when we say human rights, when we say equal rights, when you said equalism, for example, but when we say humanism or equal, the truth is that because of this unspoken existing bias in which, for example, even in healthcare studies, women's health is not studied, and then you make the treatment based on studies of men, the whole work of feminist activists and feminist scholars going back hundreds of years was to say the reason to call it something specific that addresses the question of bias on the basis of gender. So just like we say racism is bias on the basis of color or race, casteism is bias on the basis of caste, ethnicism is based on ethnic origin or categories. In that sense, feminism was unique in which it was identifying a set of structural discriminatory policies that was based solely on the basis of whether somebody was born or appeared as feminine. That is where that comes from. So it is not actually, in my opinion, that feminism is simply the opposite of patriarchy, in which it means that, patriarchy is a system in which one group of people is benefiting, aka men, and feminism is the opposite of that, which says we are only going to privilege women. That isn't the case. That's what I said at the beginning. I said that the ideals of feminism are actually that all human beings, regardless of gender, regardless of sex, regardless of caste, should be treated equally. So I just would say that I don't actually think, I think that may be how it is interpreted. In Germany, I told Suki the first thing when I was doing my research recently, 6 months ago, when I said I'm looking at the question of feminist foreign policy in Germany, the first answer from German men was, oh, but isn't feminism about men hating people? Man hating women were called feminists. So I would just humbly say that no, that isn't the definition of feminism. And yes, you're absolutely correct. We should be fighting for the well-being of all people. And if you heard earlier, my point was that many men, if not all men, also suffer under patriarchy. They may suffer differently, but they do have burdens and they do have responsibilities in a system that puts them in a very tight place also. Men are not allowed to cry. Men are not allowed to say, I don't want to go to war. Men are not allowed to do 100 things inside a patriarchal system, which puts as many restrictions on them as it puts on women. Yes, there is a difference. Women are paying with their lives, and that is what Didi just said, which is the beating and the violence against women, which is countenanced, is also something that we have to deal with. But I would say it is connected to this way in which men are considered to only show their emotions in one way, which is through anger or violence. Because they are not allowed to show vulnerability, because they are not allowed to show fear, because they are not allowed to show anxiety, because they are not allowed to say, I lost my job and now I'm feeling like shit because I can't take care of my family, the only way that society has given for them to legitimately show their feelings is violence. That we have to change. So I'll let others respond. And on the channels of discourse, you were saying, I think somebody, Rohit, you asked a question, what kinds of channels of discourse? I'll have a very short answer to that. A long time ago, Eleanor Roosevelt, who was one of the framers of the human rights, the Charter of Human Rights in the UN, said, where after all do human rights begin? In small places, close to home. यानी कि हमारे जो हक होते हैं वो कहीं दूर से तो नहीं आते हैं, नॉट जस्ट फ्रॉम द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, ये घर की बात होती है. एंड आई वुड से चैनल्स ऑफ डिस्कोर्स वहीं पे शुरू होनी चाहिए. दैट इज़ वेयर चैनल्स ऑफ डिस्कोर्स बिगिन. दे मस्ट बिगिन विद a father being able to say to a daughter, as mine said to me, Beta, you can be whatever you want to be. I am with you on this. Let me see. When people used to come and say, oh, what a pity you only have 3 daughters, my father would be the first person to say, I'm very proud of my 3 daughters, and any one of my daughters is better than any of your sons. You know, that was a little bit of excess pressure. He doesn't have to say better than. But I do think that channels of discourse can be created by each one of us in our own spaces. When is the last time you saw somebody making a joke which you knew was not a nice joke? About woman, a comment, a pass, in which you said to your friend, Yaar, na karo bhai, don't do that. Why? And the guy's like, oh yeah, you're a sissy, you're a pussy, whatever they say, you know, men to each other men, to diminish other men, because you're somehow not allowed to say something. That is the place. If we had more men talking to other men about things that made them uncomfortable or made them feel bad, we'd have a very different society. And I would say the same thing about women. If women were raising their sons to pick up their own plates and clean their own rooms and make their own beds, then wives would not be dealing with husbands who expected that wives should be like their mothers and take care of them 100%. Right? So this, for me, channels of discourse, whether in our workplaces or in our homes or in our governments, have to start in the small places closest to home.
Thank you.
Okay, तो मैं आपके फेमिनिज्म और पेट्रियार्की वाले क्वेश्चन पे एक लाइन बोल के फिर आई विल गो ऑन टू वुमेन एज वोट बैंक वाला क्वेश्चन. सो फेमिनिज्म और पेट्रियार्की दो पहलू ऑफ एक कॉइन नहीं है. आइडिया लोगों के दिमाग में ये होता है कि अगर पेट्रियार्की को फेमिनिज्म से रिप्लेस कर देंगे तो जो सीईओ है या जो मुखिया है घर का वो अब महिला बन जाएगी. वो नहीं है. एक एग्जाम्पल दे सकती हूँ मैं इमेजिन करने का कि फेमिनिस्ट सोसाइटी वर्सेस मैस्कुलिनिस्ट सोसाइटी वुड बी कि अगर से फॉर एग्जांपल इंडिविजुअल हाउसेज हैं और हम लोग अलग अलग रहते हैं और मतलब मेरा घर मेरा है और इनका घर उनका है ऐसे करके, तो मैट्रिलिनियल सोसाइटी या फेमिनिस्ट सोसाइटी वुड मीन कि हमारे पास कलेक्टिव रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ऑफ द कॉलोनी. तो इट इज़ नॉट अबाउट रिप्लेसिंग वन विद द अदर. वो ऐसा नहीं है कि अभी तुम मतलब अगर मैं बोल रही हूँ कि दुनिया में बहुत क्राइम है तो फेमिनिस्ट वर्ल्ड के आने से ये नहीं होगा कि अरे अब महिलाएं क्राइम कर रही हैं. उसका मतलब ये होगा कि गवर्नमेंट कैसे रिस्पॉन्ड कर रहा है उस क्राइम को, उस क्राइम रेट को रिड्यूस करने के लिए, क्योंकि वो क्राइम ज़्यादातर महिलाओं के खिलाफ होती है. तो एक फेमिनिस्ट गवर्नमेंट ज़्यादा ध्यान देगी कि उसको कैसे ठीक करना है. तो वो वाली ये बहुत कॉमन प्रॉब्लम है. मतलब ये बहुत कॉमन थिंकिंग है कि सब कुछ रिप्लेस हो जाएगा तो पावर ही रहेगा. ये वैसा वाला नहीं है. इट इज़ अबाउट इमेजिनिंग डिफरेंट सिस्टम्स इन द वे द वर्ल्ड ऑपरेट्स. That is the difference, and that is why it is a very worth discussing topic every day of our lives. मतलब जितना हम उसके बारे में सोचें उतना कम है. तो ये था. दूसरा था in terms of leadership also. जैसे मार्गरेट थैचर हो गई या इंदिरा गांधी हो. इंदिरा गांधी was called the Iron Lady of India ना, क्योंकि उन्हीं के टाइम पे न्यूक्लियर टेस्टिंग और इमरजेंसी और ये सारे जो हार्ड, ऐसा सोचोगे आप किसी भी मेल पॉलिटिशियन के साथ जो एसोसिएट कर सकते हो उन्होंने वो किया इन टर्म्स ऑफ प्रोटेक्टिंग इंडिया अगेंस्ट फॉर मतलब ऑल ऑफ द थिंग्स. तो इट डजंट मीन कि वो जस्ट कॉज महिला आ गई तो महिला के तरीके से ये सारी चीज़ें रन होने लगी. नहीं, अगर हम सिस्टम को सेम रखेंगे और किसी को भी ऑन टॉप पोजीशन पे डाल देंगे तो उनको भी वैसे ही डील करना पड़ेगा जैसे अभी करंट सिस्टम है. यू कांट मतलब आप चेस खेलने जा रहे हो, वहाँ जाके ये नहीं बोल सकते कि नहीं अब तो मुझे क्रिकेट खेलना है तो आपको चेस के रूल्स. तो हमें गेम ही चेंज करना पड़ेगा in order to imagine कि feminist world या feminist governance कैसी दिखती है. So that would be my input to that question. Second was women direct benefit transfers वाला जो question था. तो मुझे मतलब to take a lot of credit for myself. I blame myself for this in the sense that Access Polity, when it was launched, we had a panel at IIC, and there on the stage I said that women don't even have the misfortune of being considered as a vote bank. And 2 years later, every government is using women as a vote bank. So I am going to take way too much credit and blame myself. But see, okay, so basically when you think of vote bank politics or appeasing a certain community sort of politics, not religious community, I'm talking about benefits wala directly jo communities make up karti hai in a person's strategic framework, right? If you look at that, if you trace the journey, everyone starts with direct benefit transfer only, right? How do you convince the community as a leader that I care for you? You start with easiest, but action is way more difficult than one-time transfer before election, right? After election, you can just say ki, oh, LG ne allow nahi kiya, paisa khatam ho gaya, whatever. Many things you can say. Or you can be like the South Indian states and continue to give it. But how do you convince that those voters that I care for you is the easiest form is sending the money? So I will be a little, selfish and be like, okay, fine, give the money. Okay, right now, give the money. Once your strategy of giving money and we are still not giving you votes fails, then you will move on to thinking, oh, we actually need to do something for women. So सारा जिम्मा दुनिया का हमने नहीं उठा रखा है कि हमारे लिए ही सबसे ज़्यादा clean politics हो भाई, नहीं हमको पैसा नहीं चाहिए. If you've seen Arvind Kejriwal, Aam Aadmi Party's ads, right? There is a woman who's going to her local grocery store and she's like the grocery person doesn't even ask her what all she wants. He puts aloo, he puts all of that into her basket and she's roaming around the aisle and then, looks at a shampoo, like a white bottle, which would signify that it's a expensive shampoo, like a nice bright bottle, and she puts it and he's like, oh, are you sure this is for 300 rupees? So the lady says, no, my brother is sending me money every month, so I can buy it now. And then it goes on to say कि भाई हो तो ऐसा केजरीवाल जैसा, right? But very brilliant campaign by Aam Aadmi Party. But who's to say that? Oh, okay. So, but who's to say that this 2100 rupees or 1000 rupees or 500 rupees is not adding on to, but ये सच है कि नहीं story? How can you say कि नहीं ये सिर्फ propaganda है या उस 2100 rupees से कोई benefit नहीं होगा, right? So मतलब मैं नहीं जिम्मा उठाऊंगी कि नहीं पहले महिलाओं की सबसे कठिन प्रॉब्लम शुरू करो फिर पैसा देना, नहीं. वी ऑल्सो डिजर्व मनी. सिंस सेंचुरीज politicians have been giving money before election to mukhiyas of the house, na? So now the women are getting, because thanks to Modi ji technological advancement and Jan Dhan Yojana and direct benefit transfer. So I'm going to be a little in that manner. I had just one line to say about the economic independence and the domestic violence bit, if I can. So जैसे आपने कहा कि जिनके पास आर्थिक क्षमता भी है फिर भी वो वायलेंस की या गलत कामों की शिकार हो जाती हैं, तो इसमें एक बहुत इम्पॉर्टेंट पॉइंट है जो मुझे ऐसा लगता है जो अभी तक हम लोग एक्सप्लोर नहीं कर रहे हैं सोसाइटी में, जो मैम ने थोड़ा सा टच किया था, वो मेंटल हेल्थ के बारे में. सो जस्ट बिकॉज एक महिला को समझ आता है कि उसकी आर्थिक शक्ति इतनी है, ज़रूरी नहीं है उसको ये समझ आए कि हाँ मुझे अपने पति को छोड़ना ज़रूरी है, राइट? वो जो साइकिल ऑफ अब्यूज़, ये जो पूरा डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस का टॉपिक है, ये जो विषय है, ये मेंटल हेल्थ से बहुत ज़्यादा जुड़ा हुआ है. तो आप देखेंगे कि बड़ी से बड़ी महिलाएं, मतलब आपका जो अनुभव है ग्राउंड पे वो एकदम सही है, ना इंडिविजुअल है, मतलब दुनिया भर में है, क्योंकि वो मेंटल हेल्थ से टाइड है, वो आर्थिक क्षमता से टाइट नहीं है, वो मतलब मैं किसी स्कूल की प्रिंसिपल हो सकती हूँ उससे टाइट नहीं है, मेरी स्टेटस इन सोसाइटी से टाइट नहीं है, वो मेंटल हेल्थ से है. और मेंटल हेल्थ की जैसे इन्होंने बात की कि पॉलिटिशियंस के लिए बहुत ज़रूरी है, आम पूरी दुनिया में. हाँ, तो हमें अगर से फॉर एग्जांपल जो भी यहाँ वायलेंस के स्फीयर में काम कर रहा है, प्रोवाइडिंग हेल्प या प्रोवाइडिंग एनी सॉर्ट ऑफ सपोर्ट टू विक्टिम्स ऑफ वायलेंस ओवर हियर, अगर आपके अप्रोच में मेंटल हेल्थ थेरेपी, ब्रेकिंग पैटर्न्स, उनको सिखाना कि पैटर्न्स कैसे ब्रेक करो, और ये सब नहीं है तो वो नहीं काम करने वाला है. वो बार 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 उसी स्थिति में वापस अपने आप को पाएंगी अगर उनको कोई शुरुआत से ही ना सिखाए कि भैया जब भी तुमको लगे कि ऐसा आदमी आसपास घूम रहा है तो दूसरी दिशा में जाओ. ये वाला ये बहुत नुआंस टॉपिक है. मैं बहुत समरी, ओवर सिंप्लीफिकेशन, ओवर जनरलाइजेशन के तौर पे बोल रही हूँ, लेकिन एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट इसका ये है. तो नॉट टू से कि आपको अपनी आर्थिक क्षमता बढ़ानी नहीं चाहिए, बट नॉट टू ऑल्सो से कि सिर्फ आर्थिक क्षमता बढ़ने से आप लेस प्रोन होगे डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस. देयर इज नो कोरिलेशन टू दैट. There is no causal relation to that. Yeah, I'm done.
No, you respond. No. I've already said mine. She's responded. You didn't want to close? Do you finish and then she'll finish?
Okay, well, I would say a lot of the questions have been responded. I would maybe comment a bit on the reimagining leadership versus reimagining society. So I think that's a very interesting framing, really, because for me the short answer is both, obviously. The question is how, so it's a bit of a chicken and egg kind of question. And for me, it's like, isn't it the same? Like, if our ideal system would be that politics are truly representative of society, then it should be one and the same, right? If we're changing, society, we're also changing leadership. So adding to that, I would say maybe the best mechanism to trigger that circular process is to improve our system. One way to do that we're trying to promote, for example, is democratic innovations, which is opening ways for politics to be more participative, to include the people in the policy-making process. So this way, first of all, people have more power, are actually empowered to participate in the process, but also for politicians, to get to connect with electorates, to society, get to be one of them, get to understand, their needs, and perhaps, break the cycle of distrust. So this might be a way to start reimagining not just leadership versus society, but rather what we understand as politics and leadership in general. Because I guess that's where the dissonance lies, right? We shouldn't be separate. It should be a more connected thing, and our leaders should be ourselves. As I was saying in the beginning, we should be the leader. We should all lead at some point in our lives. So maybe that's how we also kind of like reimagine the cycle, And about the question about economic empowerment, I think you both raised it, but I just wanted to comment a little bit on the quota part, on the yes. So I think you called it here differently, reservation, but I've been asked this question a lot. Like, does it really work? Is it really feminist? There shouldn't be any quotas. Why women? Why not the best? And the short answer for me is what Kavita already said. Representation does matter, not because women are better than men, but because they have a different lived experience. So they know that bringing water is difficult. That's why they changed the system. So they're bringing, and that's true not just for women, but for everybody. That's why representation matters. So the quota is a transitional measure. It should only work to get to the place we want to get. But it's important to have it because we need to bring these perspectives into the system so we can have the policies that will, improve the lives of everyone else. So, yeah.
नेता के साथ काम करते हैं ना, मैं इसलिए तैयार हैं क्या? हम लोग तैयार हैं अगर कोटा हो भी जाए, मतलब अगर ये सिर्फ चुनावी वादा नहीं है और हो भी जाए तो क्या हम तैयार हैं? हम बिल्कुल तैयार हैं, क्योंकि अगर आप डेटा देखेंगे जितनी महिलाएं खड़ी होती हैं चुनाव के लिए उनका स्ट्राइक रेट हायर है मेन से, उनका वोट शेयर बेटर रहता है, उनका मतलब जनता। और ये आपके क्वेश्चन से भी टाइड है लीडरशिप और सोसाइटी वाले, कि जनता हमें बार बार दिखा रही है कि वो वुमेन नेता चूज करने के लिए रेडी है, जितने भी तरीकों से वो दिखा सकती है, जितने भी अनऑफिशियल तरीकों से वो दिखा सकती है वो दिखा रही है। तो अब नाउ हमारे पर है कि एज अ पॉलिटिकल पार्टी हम उतनी महिलाओं को टिकट दे रहे हैं कि नहीं दे रहे हैं, और ज़रूरी नहीं है, और मतलब ये भी ज़रूरी है कि आप सिर्फ नाम वाली टिकट ना देना, काम वाली दीजिए। जैसे एक सजेशन है मुझे, मैं जो पार्टीज़ को देना चाहूँगी कि जहाँ जहाँ गुंडई टाइप लीडर्स को आप टिकट दे रहे हैं, अगर आप ऑपोजिशन में हैं और जो सामने वाला है वो गुंडा क्या कहा जा सकता, बाहुबली कहा जा सकता है उनको, तो आप महिला को खड़ा कर दीजिए ना, फिर देखिए जनता कैसे सपोर्ट करती है, मतलब करेगी ही करेगी। सो एक ये तरीका हो सकता है जहाँ हम एक सिस्टम ही ऐसा बना दे कि हाँ, क्योंकि क्रिमिनलिटी इन पॉलिटिक्स तो है ही, तो आप वुमेन को दे के देखिए, मतलब मैं गारंटी दे दूँ, और एक पॉलिटिकल कंसल्टेंट टीम हायर कर लीजिए, सब सारे चुनाव निकल जाएंगे आपके। तो ये एक तरीका हो सकता है जो मुझे लगता है, तो हम तैयार हैं फॉर श्योर। और लीडरशिप और सोसाइटी, कभी ऐसा होता है कि सोसाइटल चेंज के लिए आपको कैटलिस्ट करना, थोड़ा जैसे सीट बेल्ट वॉज अ सेफ्टी इशू, तो हाँ सुप्रीम कोर्ट को आके बोलना पड़ा कि नहीं भैया मैंडेटरी है कि सीट बेल्ट पहनो, तो अब लोग सीट बेल्ट पहनते हैं। कभी ऐसे होता है और कभी ग्राउंड से ही आ जाता है कि पब्लिक को ये चेंज चाहिए, तो पब्लिक तो लीडर्स उस चेंज को कर देती हैं, तो इट्स अ लाइक अ विशियस साइकिल of good things that are happening.
All right, super tight on time. We have 3 portraits. Can we have 3 cohort members come forward so we can just do the thank you all together and save time on that? So just requesting all the cohort members, let's just put a huge round of applause for all of us. Thank you so much to Kavita, Sukhi and Vasudha. Kavita को जाना है, so just very quickly यदि हम portraits यहाँ पर ले आए, just give them their portraits, बाकी हम साथ में दे सकते हैं. Just come very quickly. 3 cohort members आ जाओ जल्दी से, please, very quickly. Yeah, just give them their portraits. That's to Vasudha. Vasudha का इधर लेकर आओ. Just give their portraits, or we can just take this. Yeah, just the portraits. Yeah, come quickly. Give it. Yeah, come. Yes, come. And a group picture, everybody, come on. Satakshi, come. Kangshi, come. Come. Oh, this is lovely. Goodness. And you all look this side. Thank you so much. Thank you. I know हमने start किया था conversation. We started the conversation with the 21st century. As you leave the rooms, hope one point is imprinted, which is the society needs to change. So in your houses, the question about and the discussion on menstrual issues, right? महावारी में महिलाओं को अलग बैठने की क्यों जरूरत है? यदि प्रॉपर्टी पे हमारा अधिकार है बराबर का, लेकिन यदि हम भाई से मांगेंगे तो क्या हमारा मायका छूट जाएगा? राइट? यदि हमारे हेल्थ का इश्यू है, आज पेट दुख रहा है, तो क्या हम अपने बॉस को नहीं बोल सकते हैं? सो एज यू वॉक आउट ऑफ दिस रूम, रिमेंबर द सेंचुरी एंड व्हाट हैपेंस एट ग्लोबल लेवल. दोस कॉन्वर्सेशंस हैव टू बी इंटरनलाइज्ड एंड स्टार्टेड फ्रॉम you and from this space. Thank you very much, and a huge round of applause for all of you. Thank you. Please join us for lunch, and then we will at the porch. Yeah, okay. Join us for lunch in the lawn, and then we will come back here sharp at 2:30 for making politics safe and viable for women. Please don't go away after lunch. Come back because the conversation is on. Thank you so much. Thank you. This was lovely. It's like I had so much fun. I'm coming on the other side, but thank you.
Very nice.